And this cuts off, if you can't hear me, definitely let me know. But I'm really very excited. So many of you showed up tonight, and I hope you won't be disappointed. As I said here over the Masses that this weekend, this is something that personally has affected me very much. Getting very much in tune with Christ and His suffering, drawing me ever closer to Him. We're going to start this evening off with a little prayer. I'm going to speak for about 3.5 hours. And then, so glad you're all comfy and in your places. I plan to speak for about 40 minutes, maybe 45. And then I did have a little video I wanted to put on at the end of the debate, but we can put that on, or we can take questions and answers. But let's begin with prayer. There was in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dear Jesus, you told us that wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in your name, that you would be present. There are many more than 2 or 3 of us here tonight, and also we're here in your presence in the Blessed Sacrament. Bless this time that we have together, that we may grow ever closer to you through our devotion, through our prayer, through the broadening of our minds and our hearts, to discover ever more your real presence in our lives. And may our study of the Shroud of Turin lead us closer to your reality in each one of our lives. We ask all these blessings in your name, you, O Lord, forever and ever. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So, as I shared with you over the Masses this weekend, this thing that you see in front of you, this life-size replica of the Shroud of Turin of Jesus' burial cloth, is really much better seen in this black and white negative image of the burial cloth. And when I first studied it, as I mentioned to you back in 1986, the newest reports at that time came from what they call the STIR project, the STIR Shroud of Turin Research Project. And the top American scientists at the time got permission from the Vatican to go over, study the Turin burial cloth, and many of them went over to actually debunk it, to say it's just a painting, it's not really a burial cloth, it's a medieval forgery. And they went over there, and they were shocked. They said, well, it must be a painting. So they took the cloth, and it was a painting, they would show light behind it, you would see the paint, and say, okay, we can go home, it's just a fake. And they put light behind it and said, well, there's no paint on this object, so it's not a painting. So let's try to figure out, is it something else? And you go on and on. If you're interested in reading it, so the STURP, S-T-U-R-P project. So they did that in 1976. I said, I read about 1986. John Jackson, Eric Junker, guys from the Air Force Academy in Los Alamos in New Mexico, all did this. And many of them were befuddled at the end. They said, scientifically, we can't say this is the burial cloth of Christ because we don't have DNA proof. Right? It's not like we have Jesus' toothbrush, and we could examine the saliva of that, and examine the blood here, and make it all fit together. So scientifically, they said we can't say that this is definitely the burial cloth of Christ. But what we can say is what really intrigued me, that this was of a man, actually he was about my size, he was about 5'10", 5'11", which was very big for a man at that time. The average height for men was about 5'4", 5'5". Jesus would be considered a much taller man. No, now I'm a medium-sized or smaller man, but he would have been considered very big at the time. Weighed about 165, 170 pounds. It was from 2,000 years ago, the pollen, the calcium stains, the other things that they found. They said this is a man who was scourged, crucified, crowned of thorns. Everything kind of fits in with the gospel, but we can't say this is definitively it. What I want to do is I want to do a little walk through history. These slides are actually from a friend of mine who's
much more of an expert on the shroud than I am. But he and I got to know each other. We were at a conference together in Dallas a number of years ago. So I'm using some of his slides here. So what we do know for sure, though, is that, oh, I should have gone there. So that was 1976, 78, they report all these things, I read in 86. Then in 1988, when I finished my first part of my seminary, there was a big announcement that was made that the Shroud of Turin is a fake. The carbon-14 dating says it's actually from the year 1260 to 1390. I remember that's when I just looked and said, okay, it was a hoax. It was kind of a neat hoax, but science says it's this. Then when I came back, as I said, I saw it in Turin myself. When I came back to the U.S., I found that a whole bunch of other scientists said, well, the carbon-14 actually wasn't accurate because you took the sample from the wrong part of the shroud. And I'm going to get into that. So what I want to do is a little historical analysis, a little scientific analysis, kind of brings back and forth in time of what we actually know. The Bible tells us that when Jesus was taken down from the cross, Joseph of Arimathea took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, right? The Bible tells us that. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they all speak about that. In the Greek, it's syndome, or syndom, meaning the burial cloth. So, in the Gospels tell us that after the resurrection, right, Peter and John are running to the tomb. John gets there before Peter. He looks inside, but he doesn't go in until Peter goes first because he respects his authority, blah, 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 blah. And then they go in and they see the tomb, the empty tomb, and the linen cloths just lying there. And it says they saw and they believed. Now, I like to think that in our culture today, as it's been throughout history, whenever someone is famous or someone's important, we keep things that belong to them. Like, you know, they sold, I don't know, Mickey Mantle's jersey from the game that he won in the World Series. It sells for thousands of dollars, right? People hold on to these little things. So much so for people, early Christians, who believe that this is really the Messiah, that he really rose from the dead. The last thing that he would have touched as a human being was these burial cloths. And I imagine that Peter and John would actually have gathered them up and kept them. But you know, in the early Christian years of our church, it was a crime to be a Christian. You could be killed if you had a copy of the Bible. You could be killed if you were saying that you believed in Jesus, any of these things. So like many things, even like the scripture, the scrolls that we had, they often kept hidden away because if the Romans found out about it, they could kill you and your family. So I believe that these burial cloths were very reverently taken up, very reverently stored, and then that's what we believe. Now we know from the 1500s forward, we know this cloth that you can see today has always been there. Right, the family, the Duke of Savoy, and everything, the gave the cloths, it's been there. We know historically it's been there. But we have 1,500 years in between to say, well, where was it? And what happened? I want to share with you some interesting historical stories here. There was a king, Abgar, and Eusebius is one of the great historians of the early church. And they explain the fact that this king Abgar lived in Edessa, which would be north and west of Jerusalem, heading off towards Europe. That one of the apostles, either Thomas or Thaddeus, went and presented him with a cloth with the face of Jesus on it. And that cloth actually cured him. And the king was cured of his leprosy when he beheld the image. And it was, as I said, it was like a little tablecloth type of thing, like a little face cloth. And that's what they saw. Now I'm going to show you later, as I showed you before with the folds and the shroud, the way the shroud has been folded over the years. We know all the priest marks this way and that way. What was generally left was about that image there. So King Abgar, obviously cured, becomes a Christian, all of these things happen, wonderful things. Then historically, we know that, yes, this is all conjecture, but to me it makes a logical sense. That cloth with the image of Jesus on it was then brought to Edessa. And again, a lot of the persecution of the Christians, it was historical records that it was found there in 554. After that, it was about 400 years where there's no knowledge of where it was. But in 944, it was clearly taken to Constantinople. There are descriptions that are made of it. It's this image not made by human hands, and it has this picture of this Redeemer, etc., etc. And when you look at Christian art, and that was one of the clips I was going to show on to you, it's a University of California professor, but maybe I'll put it on tomorrow night. He shows when we have paintings of Christ all throughout the centuries, the face of Christ is always the same in the first centuries. He said it's remarkable. Every single time, it's the same face. And where do we get this idea of what Jesus looked like? Does the Bible tell us? Does Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John tell us what the face of Christ looked like? Did he have blue eyes, brown hair, black hair? Was he tall? Was he short? It doesn't mention any of those identifying characteristics about him. Nothing. No descriptions like that. But when the artists go to paint, they always make these same images over and over again. And I will definitely bring that little clip in tomorrow for you to see. Well, we know it's there in Constantinople. It's heading further west, heading more towards Europe. It's described as being a folded burial cloth of a full-length image and bloodstains. So there's a homily, a sermon we have from 1944, Hagia Sophia. There's other ceremonial texts a few years later. And we know it was there for probably 200, 300 years. And then eventually, and this is not a pretty part of our history as a church, we know about all of the crusades that happened. Constantinople was one of the most amazing cities, and our crusaders, and the little political difficulties that went on, we felt that they didn't help us enough fighting the Muslims and the Holy Land, and there was the sack of Constantinople in 1204. And it was during that time, in 1204, that the crusaders stole this cloth. And then there's a whole bunch of other historical references to the Knights of Templar, and et cetera, et cetera. We'll get into all of that kind of craziness that's there. But we basically stole it, the Western Church from the Eastern Church, so to speak. And then it winds up, it's reported that it's in Athens, right, a little further from Constantinople to Athens, 2 different times. And then eventually it lands in France. And it's in France for the next few centuries. And again, there's recordings of it, that the shroud was presented to the bishop in 1207. In 1349, it was kept in the Cathedral of St. Etienne. Blah, blah, blah. You can read all the little history there. So it goes and goes, that this cloth that everyone's talking about, the face of Jesus, et cetera, et cetera. Then, we know there was an exhibition in Lille, France, in 1356. There's different medallions, different commemorative stamps of it, and it actually shows the same thing we see. It shows this long cloth with this frontal image and this dorsal image of this crucified man, and we know it was there at that time. But at that time is when the authenticity was first doubted. And the bishop that was there said that, oh, a man presented it, he actually painted it, he confessed it to me, which is kind of weird, like, because you can't reveal what people say to you in confession, right, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, that's a little weird story. I can tell you Father Carlos told me in confession if you want to hear it. Right? So anyway, saying that the person confessed to doing this, and I'm not going to get lost in a little history here. But what I want to show you is kind of like the path of this Edessa cloth. So we believe it started right down in Jerusalem, went up to Edessa, to Constantinople, to Athens, all the way up into France, and then eventually it would work its way down into Italy. And there's all these like little historical moments where you can kind of piece together, these people are describing the same type of image over and over again, but many times at the beginning, instead of being this whole length thing that they describe a shorter image, which I also believe has a lot to do with what we call Veronica's veil. I'm sure many of you have heard of that. It's right over there, our 6th station right at the cross. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. The word Veronica, Veronica, means true image. So whether this Veronica speak to us of this Veronica. Like she puts the cloth, the face of Christ along it, and she wipes his face. I believe there's a great similarity to it. And we don't really know this Veronica from the Bible. It's a tradition of the stations that developed over time, where they perhaps speaking about this image, the Shroud of Turin, that was in Jerusalem, in Edessa, in Constantinople, in Athens, etc., etc. So as I said, those are the historical moments. There's Abgar again, the face of Christ, very similar. This other image we see. And as I was trying to show you before, the way the image was folded, right? It was folded once here in half, kind of like what you see here, then folded a second time, and folded a third time. And this is basically the image that many people for many years would have known. And all of these things fit in very well the way the folds were because of those different fires that happened over time. And when one particular fire happened, which we'll describe a little bit later, and then you get all these different like pock marks here, those were the sisters, the Poor Clare nuns, fixed during that time. Oh, this is the thing about the Pantocrator. So this image of Christ that you see, Pantocrator means all-powerful. When you usually go into Greek churches and Latin churches, usually up in the front of the church, there's this image. If you go to our national shrine in Washington, hope many of you have been there, the Shrine of Immaculate Conception, there's this big, huge Pantocrator, Christ all-powerful that's there. So that was a typical image of Christ. This painting, right, is from the mid-6th century. And the markings that you see, the way they painted Christ, almost identical, right? These puffy big eyes, right? The elongated nose, the beard, the different things. And you don't see it as well in this one, but there's others where they have like little tufts of hair, where you can see the little tufts of hair over here. And it's over and over and over in time. Whenever artists were painting Christ, it's like they had a prototype. They had a prototype. But what was that prototype? We believe that the prototype was actually the Shroud of Turin, which they would have seen as the face cloth of Christ, etc., over time. As I said, I'll bring that clip tomorrow. He's a really funky University of California art professor, really kind of hippie style, but just wonderful and bright, and he shows all of the similarities that existed over time. But I'm going to get into that more tomorrow. So historically, this image has lots of different clues, lots of different things of where we know it is. But this is where I'm going to get into some of the history. So, the Duke of Savoy, he bought the shroud in 1464. Then he moves into the Chambéry Chapel, 1502. Then, whatever his granddaughter, great-granddaughter, whoever it was in the family, Margaret of Austria, she died. She bequeathed the shroud, as was understood at the time. And then they had the shroud rewoven because of some of the things that happened over time, and because of the damage that was done, etc., etc. So what I believe that happened is that in the Middle Ages, when they were doing some of these fix-ups with the reweaving of the tapestry, the way they used to display the shroud is you'd have a whole bunch of men, and we're going to show you a picture from 1898, where a whole bunch of bishops were holding the Turin shroud. They used to take this 14 foot long, and they would hold it up. They would hold their hands, a whole bunch of people holding up the shroud. Or we have also paintings, images, where the royal family would go out on a special occasion, and they would exhibit the shroud, and they would stand on the balcony, so all the people down below could see. They would hold up the shroud. So you can imagine all these hands, all this manipulation, all this kind of pulling on the shroud and everything that was done there. And at one stage, as it says there, she bequeathed a 3.5 inch piece of the shroud to her church. Right, it was cut, and the shroud was then rewoven, etc., different things that were done. What I actually believe happened is that when we fast forward to the 1988 sampling, instead of taking little bits of the shroud in different places, they took it all from the side where it had been manipulated over the years with so many hands, so many candles, so much soot, so much wax, so much things, and the different fires it had been in and everything like that, where it was probably rewoven as well and re-strengthened. You know, sometimes it's like when you have a beautiful tapestry or something, you may want to weave something around it or hold it there and everything. So, and that's where they took it from. So I actually think the carbon dating was correct, but it was correct from the reweaving of the part that was used there. So that's an important part. And as I said, there is a chapel, it almost destroyed, the fire in the chapel almost destroyed the shroud. And then 2 years later, when the Poor Clare sisters were doing this work, I mean, they did it kind of very sloppily. So I yelled at all the sisters. I said, how dare you do this? But, you know, they were trying their best. But what had happened, the way it was all folded, you can see it was folded, folded, folded. It was all over one spot. It was in this box, this molten silver box basically that when it melted at the high temperature, it all kind of rolled up, went down on this one corner, destroyed it. Then they threw water on it, they tried to fix it, they tried to do these things. So you can see there's water stains here, there's water stains here, and they all fit perfectly well with the way the shroud would have been folded at that time. Here again, it shows you the damage from the fire, the different things, the patches that were done, trying to preserve it and everything. But again, you can see that over here. These are the Poor Clare sisters and their patchwork, trying to do the best they could by hand, obviously doing these things. And then, so, as I said before, we did it part of the history here, from here to here to here, and then eventually it's back in Turin. It's, well, not back in Turin, it's in Turin, and that's where it's been basically for the last 5 centuries. This is the time, once it finally got back there, now you're into a more modern era, so to speak. That's when they did a lot of these public expositions. So you can see this is a painting where the nobility and the probably the princess and the king and the bishop and all the other nobles at the time are holding it up there, showing it to the public. And again, these are paintings, this goes back to 1663. Lots of that, lots of manipulation. So even if, as I said, the carbon dating has a lot of issues that are with it because it's not a pure sample. This is actually a picture from 1898. There it is in Turin, and there you can see the different bishops that are there holding it once again. So going back now to what I mentioned a little bit in my homily over the weekend, one of the big takeaways was in 1898, because that's when you say to yourself, it reveals so much more. Because in essence, either this truly is the burial cloth of Jesus Christ, and we'll never be able to fully, scientifically, 1,100% prove that it actually is, because scientifically we can't do that. Either it is, or it's a forgery that someone made to make it look like it was the burial cloth of Jesus Christ from 2,000 years ago. But no one's ever been able to replicate how it was done. And they've tried so many different ways. They've tried to paint it. But one of the things that you see about this image, as I said before, there's no paint on the image. The actual coloration that you see is just, and that's a little video I'm going to put on at the end of Russ Bernal. It's the microfibers on top of the fibers that make up all of the things. That is how superficial the image is. There's no way it could have been painted on there. It's not a scorch mark. It's not any of these things. But, so how, if it was a medieval forgery, this date is from 1260 to 1390, that's what it was. Okay, you say to yourself, well, how could they paint without painting, right? Because you can't even do it today with the finest little brushes. You would still fail at that. But then also, if it was a forgery, how would they have known the perfect anatomical structure where there's so many different questions that come to mind. And it was this big moment where you could actually see so much more the suffering of Christ. And I know my homily this weekend, I know it's very difficult, and I focused a lot on that suffering, and obviously that had its context in that, during that homily. Today I'm looking at it a little bit more coldly, from this other point of view. But when you look at it and all the sufferings that it endured, that Christ endured in the suffering, I mean, it really kind of stands out to you. And even the position of the hands, if it were a forgery, right, and how would this medieval forger know this? What happens when the median nerve is punctured or severed or whatever, the thumb actually goes and is hidden, right? Because when you look on the shroud, you don't see the thumb. There's no thumb that's revealed there. The thumbs are, because of the bishopy nerve, and the rigor mortis that would have set in, they're actually hidden from the shroud. And again, how would some medieval forger know about that? If also during the Middle Ages, we always painted the nail being through the palm. Why wouldn't the artist have painted it through the palm like all the other artists had done? Why would it have been in the anatomically correct position of the wrist if it wasn't actually real? So there's a lot of questions that brought up. Like Segunda Pia's photograph really kind of sparked that whole scientific debate and history of it. And I do want to show you a little bit more the flagrum paxillatum that I mentioned to you during my homily this past weekend. Remember I described it's kind of a small wooden stick with the 3 prongs on it, and afterwards it would have these little markings there. And those markings, when we take an actual flagrum paxillatum and you actually put it, it actually is exactly the right spacing all throughout the body. Again, how would a medieval forger would have known to do that? How would you have been able to paint that? How would you have been able to get all of that scientific exactness? This was done 700 or 600 years ago. I mean, it's totally impossible. But then, as I said, so Segunda Pia kind of started a thing, and this is the STIRP research project. And I actually met some of the people that were on the STIRP project. Barry Schwartz was the official photographer. He's a very devout Jewish man. I've been to his home in Colorado. We stay in touch. But he was the one that documented all of the photographs. He's actually one of the best advocates for the shroud. And he runs a website. It's called www.shroud.com. And it has something like, I don't know, like 5 billion hits or something. It's the one that people just go to over and over again. There's a lot of really great scientific stuff. And he always loves it because his father, I'm a Jewish guy, and I'm going to tell him all of you about that this is the very walk of your Messiah, the Savior. And he was just kind of a big kick out of it. The 33 scientists went over there, 33 researchers. They had 5 complete days. And they were basically working around the clock, so like 120 hours. They're all kind of taking turns. That's my reminder. I'm a little, sounds pretty good on time. They did this X-ray thing, spectrometry, microscopy. They took 30,000 photographs. They collected samples from different places. And that's where I said at the end, they said they only followed the scientific method. It was all about peer-reviewed findings, all those different things. They tried to go at it with no religious assumptions. We're just taking this as an artifact. We're just trying to study this scientifically. And their conclusions at the end is the shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man, and it's not the product of an artist. It's not the product of an artist, which I think is probably one of the most important conclusions, because the carbon dating will then tell us, no, it's a medieval forgery. And I was going to say that, like, okay, they did that 700 years ago, and they had not much skill, and it's so easy to do. Make me another one right now. Make me another one. Show me that we're so advanced that we know this. Show me how you can actually do this. And they can never do that. They never actually have done that. They tried. They tried some really unique experiments, but nothing was ever successful. The blood stains are composed of hemoglobin, and also give a positive test for serum albumin, whatever you call that. The image is an ongoing mystery. blah, 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 right? They can't go any further and say that it's actually the very cloth of Christ, but they kind of go back to it. There's a lot of other scientists that have then intervened over the years, but as I said, the one guy who, it's an interesting story, Walter McClellan, he was part of the original STIRP team. However, for whatever reason, he actually did not go over to Italy. He wasn't part of the team that was there. He was supposed to go, but he didn't go. And then he got some of the particles back, and he's analyzing, because I found paint. If I found paint, it's a painting. And then he writes this book on it. He's saying it's all a forge, and it's all painting, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of puts this other kibosh on it. And I don't know, I presume he was of goodwill and he this, that, and the other thing, but his own assistants were saying that they disagreed with his methods, they disagreed with what he found, but he wrote this book and put us all into controversy. That was shortly after the STIRP team. So that's when they decided, let's do the carbon-14 dating. And, you know, it was wonderful. The church is like, okay, like, knock yourselves out, go ahead, take the samples, and they have this whole protocol what they're supposed to do. The samples are supposed to be taken, and then that this would definitively put an end to the debate, whether it's medieval, whether it's painting, whether it's this, whether it's that. And they do it, but as they said before, they had 3 labs. It was all to be supervised by the British Museum, with a lab out in Arizona, Zurich, and Oxford. And they took this little kind of sliver, right, that was there. But they took the sliver, as I said, from the end part. The first part was to go to Arizona, that little tiny bit there, that to Zurich, that to Oxford, second tinier strip to Arizona. They had these different things, but it was all from this one place. And the protocol originally said it was supposed to be from 3 or 4 places throughout. No one understands why did they violate that protocol? But whatever the reason was, that's what happened. So when that all came back, and they all took it from that one spot, scientifically they said, if all 3 labs corresponded to each other, they said that this would be in the 95th percentile of confidence, right? It was between 1260 and 1390. And that was published back in 1988. And at that time, everyone's like, okay, well, you know, that ends the problem. But for those other scientists, as I described to you before, they're like, well, it doesn't really fully answer the problem, because if you took it from the wrong piece where it was rewoven back in the Middle Ages, of course it's going to say it's from that time and everything. Anyway, as I said, the mysteries that people talk about, I didn't get into any of those things, didn't have the time to do that. So that hypothetically repaired piece, the invisible reweaving, we spoke about that, what Margaret had done. This guy, Benford, Susan Benford and Marino, I actually met them as well when I was in Dallas, and they showed about how the weaving would have been done in such a way that you wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. But if you're an expert, you could tell the difference. If you weren't, that's how well they rewove it there, et cetera, et cetera. I said that before. And then Ray Rogers, he was an interesting fellow. I did speak with him. He died a number of years ago. He was kind of one of those crusty scientists, interesting guy. But he was Los Alamos Science Fellow. He's part of the STIRP team. He was dedicated to all these different things. And he was really convinced, because he did get a little sampling area, and he was very convinced that this part of the cloth that they sent out to sample was not like the rest of the cloth. So he said, your carbon-14 dating is fine for that piece, but that piece is not representative of the whole rest of it. So then he published an article about it. He said it was very different from all the rest of it. He even sent it down to Georgia Tech with this materials expert, John Brown, who said this would appear to be obvious evidence of a medieval artisan's attempt to dye a newly repaired region of fabric to match it to the appearance of the remainder of the shroud. So basically what he's saying is that little rewoven piece, that they would have tried to make it look like the rest, and if you take a sample from that, you're probably going to find pigment on it, because they were trying to color, make it look like that, and it was from a later date. So that's from the scientific point of view. That's kind of where it ends. I want to put on a little video for you, and then I will take questions. This is my friend. He's from Atlanta, Russ Creole. And about 10 years ago, he and I were being interviewed for the History Channel, a documentary that they made. I did the background part of it. He's actually on if you ever wanted to watch that video. But he does a short little video here. It's about 14 minutes. But it's a very good one, I think, that can help us understand this better.